All right, let's talk about the original blockbuster soundtrack. And no, I'm not talking about a movie. We're going way, way back to the invention that started it all, the symphony. Let's get into it.
You know that feeling, right, when the music swells up and makes a scene just feel massive? Well, that whole idea has a wild origin story. Long before we had movie theaters or game consoles, the symphony was invented to give people that exact same rush of excitement and drama.
So, how did this amazing musical machine get built? Well, like any great piece of tech, it didn't just pop into existence. It started with what you could call a beta version. Let's unlock level 1.
So the symphony actually evolved from something else called the Italian sinfonia. Basically, think of it as the ultimate hype track for an opera, you know? It was a short, punchy piece of music played right at the beginning to get everyone in the audience to shut up, sit down, and get ready for the show.
And its structure was super simple but really effective, kind of like a perfect TikTok. It would start off fast and loud to grab your attention. Then, it would chill out for a bit with a slow, melodic section in the middle. And finally, it would end with another fast, dancey part that left everybody hyped up.
Okay, so we've got the basic model. But you know how games get updates and expansion packs? Well, it was time for the symphony's first big one. Let's call it the Mannheim DLC. So over in a German city called Mannheim, there was this crew of absolute rock star musicians. Seriously, they had the best orchestra in all of Europe, like the A-Team. And they decided the basic symphony model was cool, but it needed some new special moves to make it even better.
Their first power-up was a total game changer, the Mannheim crescendo. Imagine you're at a concert, and the crowd's cheer starts as a low murmur and builds up into a massive roar. Yeah, they figured out how to do that with instruments. It was this incredible new way to build suspense that people had never really heard before.
And they weren't done. Their next big idea was the Mannheim rocket. And yeah, it's pretty much what it sounds like. A musical melody that just shoots straight up from a low note to a high one, super fast. It sounded like a firework taking off, and it gave the music this awesome, explosive burst of energy.
At the same time, the orchestra itself was getting a massive upgrade. In the early days, it was mostly just strings. But then, composers started adding new instruments, kind of like unlocking new characters in a game. First came oboes and horns. Then you unlocked flutes and bassoons. And for the full power mode, you got trumpets and drums, making the sound way bigger and more colorful.
Okay, so with all these new instruments and special moves, the symphony needed a real strategy, a game plan. And this is where a composer named Joseph Haydn steps onto the scene. He's the guy who basically wrote the official rulebook for the symphony's 4-level structure.
So level 1 is the main quest, and it uses a pattern called sonata form. First, you have the exposition, where you meet the main characters, which are 2 different musical themes. Then comes the development, where those themes go on a wild adventure. They get into trouble, they change. And finally, there's the recapitulation, where the themes come back home, safe and sound. It's a whole story arc told with just music.
The other levels were just as key. Level 2 was like the slow, emotional side quest, a moment to get into the feels. Level 3 was the fun dance minigame, a light, bouncy dance called a minuet. And level 4, oh yeah, that was the final boss battle. A fast, loud, and totally epic finale designed to end the whole thing with a bang. So once the rules of the game were set, a couple of legendary players showed up who just completely mastered it. Let's meet the first people in the Symphony's Hall of Fame. So on one side, you've got Joseph Haydn. They call him the father of the symphony because he was the master architect who wrote the playbook. He was an expert at structure, but he also loved to throw in little musical jokes and surprises. And on the other side, you've got Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the child prodigy. He was just a natural. He learned all the rules and then found brilliant ways to break them, creating music packed with drama and melodies you just can't forget.
And Haydn wasn't just some theorist, he really put in the hours. The man wrote over 100 symphonies. Just think about that. He spent his entire life tweaking, experimenting, and perfecting this musical game until it was an absolute powerhouse.
And then there's Mozart. And this part is just mind-blowing. He wrote his first symphony when he was 8 years old. 8! I mean, what were you doing at 8? He just soaked up all the rules around him and somehow turned them into pure, timeless art.
Okay, so we've gone through a bunch of history, but why does any of this old music stuff matter today? Well, here is your final takeaway, and it's the most important part.
If you remember one thing, make it this. The symphony wasn't just invented, it was built. It was upgraded, patched, and perfected over decades by tons of brilliant people.
It evolved, just like your favorite video game gets updates to make it better and better.
And that is why it's so important. The DNA of the symphony, its structure, those power-ups like the crescendo, its ability to tell a story without any words. It's in every single epic movie score and video game soundtrack that you love today. The whole idea of building tension and taking you on an emotional roller coaster, that all started right here.
So I'm going to leave you with a little challenge. The next time you're watching a movie or playing a game and that epic music gives you goosebumps, listen closer. Can you spot the symphony upgrades they're using? Can you hear that big buildup? That massive finale? Now you know the secret code behind it. Thanks for nerding out with me.